Did you know that behind every great pyramid of Egypt lies not just the power of kings, but love stories buried in the desert sands? Today, I'm going to tell you about a brilliant architect and a forbidden love that shaped the history of ancient Egypt. If you love emotionally charged historical stories, subscribe right now and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. We're about to explore a world you've never known. Egypt, around 2560 BCE. Under the blazing sun of the Sahara Desert, Pharaoh Khufu's kingdom was entering its golden age. This was the era of magnificent architectural wonders, absolute power, and strict social rules that could never be broken. In the bustling city of Memphis, where the Nile River curved like green silk through golden wheat fields, a love story was beginning, a story that would challenge every boundary of status and power. This isn't a story about gods or pharaohs. This is a story about people, about dreams, passion, and love powerful enough to transcend even death. His name was Imhotep. No, not the famous Imhotep who built the first step pyramid. This was a different Imhotep, born 2 generations later, but no less extraordinary. From childhood, Imhotep possessed a special talent with numbers and geometry. His father was an ordinary stonemason, working on the pharaoh's construction projects. Every day after helping his father, young Imhotep would sit on large stone blocks, watching architects draw designs, calculate angles, measure dimensions. He received no formal education in schools, reserved for nobility. But nature had given him an extraordinary mind. Imhotep could look at a building and instantly understand its structure, calculate the necessary weight, the perfect angle to create balance. When he was 20 years old, an event changed his life forever. One of the major temple projects being built in Memphis encountered a serious problem. The columns that had been erected suddenly began to tilt dangerously. Senior architects met for days, but found no solution. Without timely repair, the entire project, worth thousands of hours of labor and countless resources, would collapse. Imhotep, then just a young worker, had observed the problem for days. One evening, after everyone had left, he snuck into the construction site with some simple tools. Throughout that night, he worked tirelessly, performing a series of complex measurements and calculations. The next morning, when the chief architects returned, they discovered that the columns had been reinforced with an incredibly clever system of levers and weight distribution. Not only that, he had left a detailed drawing explaining the cause of the problem and a long-term solution. News of Imhotep's talent quickly reached the ears of Khafre, son of Pharaoh Khufu. Khafre, who was preparing to inherit the throne and had ambitions to build his own pyramid, summoned Imhotep to the palace. The day Imhotep entered the palace was the day his life changed forever. Not just because he met Prince Khafre, but because he met her, Nefertari, daughter of Pharaoh Khufu, sister of Prince Khafre, and one of the most powerful princesses in the kingdom. The meeting took place in the royal gardens, where Khafre was assembling top architects to discuss plans for building his pyramid. Imhotep, as the newly promoted one, stood at the far end among the group of advisors. Nefertari appeared unexpectedly, walking gracefully along a path covered with lotus flowers. She wasn't wandering randomly. This princess was known for her sharp intelligence and interest in architecture, a rare hobby for women in that era. Their eyes met for just a moment, but in that brief instant, something changed. Are you wondering how this love story will unfold? Don't miss what's next. Hit that like button on this video and leave a comment to let me know what you think about how the story begins. Those who comment will have a chance to be mentioned in the next video. After that meeting, Imhotep was tasked with designing the pyramid for Prince Khafre. This was a tremendous honor, but also tremendous pressure. He had only 3 years to complete the design before construction would begin. Every day, Imhotep worked tirelessly. He studied Pharaoh Khufu's pyramid, the largest ever built. He analyzed every detail, learned how the massive stone blocks were transported, how they were stacked with millimeter precision. But Imhotep didn't just want to copy. He wanted to surpass. He wanted to create a pyramid not just larger, but more perfect in architecture and aesthetics. During this process, he frequently had to present progress to the royal council. And in those meetings, Nefertari was always present. At first, they only exchanged glances, then brief smiles. Then one day, after a particularly impressive presentation by Imhotep about a corridor system inside the pyramid, Nefertari proactively approached him. "Your design is very bold," she said, her tone both evaluative and curious. "But I have some questions about feasibility." Imhotep, though flustered by the princess's presence, answered confidently and in detail. She didn't just listen, but asked deep questions, showing an astonishing understanding of architecture and engineering. The conversation lasted over an hour. When it ended, both felt something special had happened. From then on, the accidental meetings became more frequent. Nefertari began appearing at the construction site under the pretext of supervising work on behalf of the pharaoh. Imhotep was always ready to explain every detail, taking private time to answer her questions. One full moon night, Imhotep was working late in his design workshop, a small room on the edge of the palace granted to senior architects. He was struggling with a complex weight distribution problem when he heard a soft knock at the door. When he opened it, he was stunned to see Nefertari standing there, wearing a simple cloak covering her face. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low and urgent. "About the design." They both knew this wasn't right. A princess was never allowed to visit a commoner's room at night, regardless of the reason. But in that moment, they didn't care about rules. Imhotep opened the door wider, and Nefertari stepped inside. From that night, a secret routine began to form. Every few nights, when everyone was asleep, Nefertari would slip into Imhotep's design workshop. They told themselves and each other that these were just discussions about architecture. But both knew the truth was deeper. Their conversations began with the pyramid but quickly moved to other topics. They shared dreams, fears, thoughts they'd never dared tell anyone else. Nefertari told Imhotep about the pressure of being a princess. "People think being born into royalty is lucky," she whispered one night, eyes gazing out the window toward the pyramid under construction. "But they don't know that my life isn't my own. Every step, every word, every smile must be calculated, weighed to serve the dynasty." Imhotep listened, and for the first time in his life, he understood that high status didn't equal freedom. On the contrary, it could be a golden cage. "But here, with you," Nefertari continued, her voice softer, "I feel like I can be myself. I'm not a princess. I'm just Nefertari." Imhotep also shared his story about childhood dreams when looking at great buildings, about his determination to rise from an ordinary stonemason's family, about the loneliness of being the only one who could see the world through the lens of numbers and geometry. "When I met you," he confessed in a moment of weakness, "I realized there's another language, one that doesn't need numbers or equations. The language of connection. It's impossible to say exactly when friendship turned into love." Perhaps it was the night Imhotep gently wiped a drop of ink from Nefertari's cheek when she accidentally touched a drawing. Perhaps it was when Nefertari brought him a honey cake, a favorite treat he'd once casually mentioned from childhood. Or perhaps it had been there from the beginning, from that first glance in the royal gardens. One night, after hours of work, they sat together on the small balcony of the design workshop, looking at the twinkling stars in the desert sky. The cool night air made them sit closer, shoulder to shoulder. Imhotep, Nefertari called softly. "Do you ever think about the future?" "All the time," he replied. "I think about the pyramid being completed. About the projects I still want to build, not like that," she interrupted. "I mean the future of us." The words hung in the air like a dangerous question. Imhotep turned to look at her, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in the eyes that were usually so strong. "Nefertari," he said, his voice trembling. "You know we can't." "I know," she interrupted, but didn't look away from him. "I know all the things we can't do. But in this moment, I don't care. I just want to know, do you feel the same way I do?" This was the decisive moment. Imhotep could step back, could respect the boundaries society had set. But his heart spoke before reason could intervene. "I love you," he whispered, the words finally pouring out like rushing water. "From the first moment I saw you, I knew my life would never be the same. You're the reason I wake up every morning, the last thought before I fall asleep." "You are." Before he could finish, Nefertari kissed him. It was both their first kiss. A sweet, gentle kiss, but also full of desperation. Because they both knew this love had no future. But in that moment, they didn't care. The story is getting to its most intense part. If you're feeling moved by this story, share this video with your friends. And don't forget to check OUT, My Ancient Egypt Stories playlist to discover many more fascinating things. Link is in the video description. From that night, their relationship entered a new phase, more dangerous, but also more transcendent. They knew they had to be extremely careful. If discovered, Imhotep would certainly be executed, and Nefertari would be imprisoned or forced to marry a king from another kingdom to repair the royal honor. They developed a complex signal system. A lotus flower placed on the balcony railing meant it was safe. A blue silk scarf meant danger, don't come. They communicated through short letters hidden in papyrus scrolls about architectural designs. Nefertari learned to disguise herself as a servant to move freely in the palace. Imhotep always ensured his design workshop had a secret escape route. But despite all the danger, they couldn't stay away from each other. Their love was stronger than fear. During this time, Imhotep's pyramid design work reached its peak. He poured all his emotions, both joy and pain, into this project. Every line, every calculation bore the mark of the love he had for Nefertari. He secretly designed a hidden room inside the pyramid. No one knew about this room except him. Even in the official blueprints, this room was disguised as part of the wall structure. One night, he led Nefertari to the construction site when everyone had left. They walked through dark corridors, climbed temporary stairs, until they reached the location of the secret room under construction. "This will be ours," Imhotep said, his voice full of emotion. "A place only we know. When the pyramid is completed, we can come here whenever we want. No one will be able to find it." Nefertari said nothing, just held him tightly. In the darkness of the unfinished pyramid, under moonlight filtering through the gaps, they made love with all their passion and desperation. Not every moment of theirs was filled with anxiety. There were also times when they found pure joy. Nefertari taught Imhotep about music and poetry, arts that a builder never had the chance to learn. She sang him ancient songs about the gods, about love, about death and rebirth. Imhotep taught her about the stars. He explained how Egyptian astronomers used constellations to orient the pyramids, how they calculated time based on the cycles of the moon and sun. They laughed, they debated, they shared dreams about a life they knew they could never have. If we weren't born into royalty and class, Nefertari dreamed one night, what do you think we'd be like? I'd be a poor architect, Imhotep laughed. And you would be who? I'd be the wife of a poor architect, she replied seriously. We'd have a small house by the Nile. I'd weave cloth and cook. You'd design beautiful houses for others. And in the evenings we'd sit on the porch, watch the sunset, and feel happy. That would be a wonderful life, Imhotep agreed, holding her close. But both knew it was just a dream. About a year after the relationship began, the first person to suspect was Amenhotep, Imhotep's teacher, the retired chief architect who still occasionally visited the construction site. Amenhotep was perceptive. He noticed the change in Imhotep, how his eyes lit up when the princess appeared, how he always found ways to extend meetings when she was present, how his designs became more emotional and bold. One day, he called Imhotep into a private conversation. "My son," he said with a voice stern but not without concern, "this old teacher has lived long enough to recognize when a young man is in love. And I'm smart enough to recognize when that love is suicidal." Imhotep froze, his body stiff. He wanted to deny it, but knew that lying to someone who had taught him everything was futile. "Master, I don't need you to confirm," Amenhotep interrupted. "I know you love Princess Nefertari, and from the way she looks at you, I gather she feels the same." Imhotep bowed his head, not knowing what to say. "Do you know how this will end?" Amenhotep continued, his voice deepening. "This isn't a fairy tale. This is Egypt, where the pharaoh's law is harsher than death itself. If discovered, you will lose your life, and she will suffer a fate worse than death." "I know," Imhotep whispered, his voice full of pain. "I know all of that. But master, how can I give up the only thing that makes me feel alive?" Amenhotep was silent for a long time, looking at his most talented student with pity. "I won't report this," he finally said. "But you must promise me one thing. Find a way to end it before it's too late. Love cannot defeat fate, my son, especially fate written by gods and pharaohs." Meanwhile, pressure from the royal family on Nefertari was increasing. She was 24 years old, a late age to marry by royal standards. Pharaoh Khufu was aging, and he wanted to see his daughter married before he died. Marriage proposals came from everywhere. Kings from Nubia, princes from the Levant, even some powerful nobles within Egypt itself. Each proposal brought political and economic benefits to the kingdom. Nefertari rejected them all, giving various reasons. Sometimes she said she wanted to wait until her brother Khafre took the throne. Sometimes she said she needed time to prepare mentally. But the pharaoh was losing patience. One evening, after a tense royal meeting, Nefertari came to see Imhotep with a pale face. "My father has given an ultimatum," she said, her voice trembling. "I must choose someone to marry within 6 months, or he will choose for me." Imhotep felt the world spinning. 6 months. They only had 6 months left. "What should we do?" she cried. For the first time he saw this proud princess shed tears. "I can't marry someone else, but I can't refuse forever either." Imhotep held her tightly, but his mind was blank. He had no answer. For the first time in his life, his outstanding intelligence couldn't solve this problem. In the following weeks, they considered many different options, each with enormous risks. They could run away, leave Egypt, go to a distant land where no one knew who they were. But this was nearly impossible. Nefertari was a princess. Her face was known throughout the kingdom. The pharaoh would send armies to find them. And even if they escaped, they would have to live as fugitives for life. Imhotep could try to elevate his status to the point where the pharaoh would accept him as a legitimate marriage candidate. But this was also nearly impossible. No matter how talented he was still just a commoner. In Egyptian history, A royal princess had never married someone not of noble lineage. Nefertari marries whoever the pharaoh chooses, and they end their relationship. They would continue to live, but not together. This was the safest option, but also the most painful. "I can't live without you," Nefertari whispered one desperate night. "If I have to marry someone else, I'd rather die." "Don't say that," Imhotep pleaded. "Never say that." But deep down he had the same thoughts. The solution came from an unexpected source: Khopha, Nefertari's brother. One night, Khopha unexpectedly appeared at Imhotep's design workshop. The prince didn't come alone, he had 2 bodyguards with him. Imhotep felt his heart pounding, thinking the secret had been discovered, but what Khopha said next stunned him. "I know about you and my sister," Khopha said bluntly. "Don't deny it, I'm not a fool. I've been watching you both for months." Imhotep wanted to run, but knew it was useless. He stood still, waiting for the verdict. "But," Khopha continued, his voice softer, "I don't intend to report this to my father." "Why?" Imhotep asked, surprised and skeptical. "Because I love my sister," Khopha replied simply. "And I know she loves you. I've seen how happy Nefertari has been this past year, something I've never seen before. I can't take that away from her." "But the pharaoh, my father, is dying," Khopha interrupted. "The physicians say he only has a few more months to live. When he dies, I will become pharaoh, and then I will have the power to change some laws." Imhotep couldn't believe what he was hearing. You'll allow us to marry?" "It's not that simple." Khopha shook his head. "Even as pharaoh, I can't openly approve such a marriage without causing outrage among the nobility. But I can create an arrangement." "An arrangement?" "Nefertari will officially marry a nobleman, someone I can trust, someone who will accept a marriage in name only. Meanwhile, you will become the royal architect, a position high enough that you can see her regularly without raising suspicion." It was a bold and risky plan, but at least it offered hope. "Why are you doing this for us?" Imhotep asked, still not fully understanding. Khopha was silent for a moment, then said, "Because I know the feeling of being forced to do what I don't want. I know the feeling when my heart wants one thing but duty demands another. I don't want my sister to go through that." Will Khopha's plan succeed? The story is about to reach its climax. If you want to know the ending, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and turned on notifications. And let me know in the comments if you were Imhotep or Nefertari, which option would you choose? 2 months later, Pharaoh Khufu died. His death wasn't unexpected. He had been seriously ill for months. But it still shook the entire kingdom. A great pharaoh had passed, the one who had built the largest pyramid ever created, who had ruled Egypt for over 20 years. Khopha ascended the throne with the pharaoh name Khopha. The coronation lasted a week, with complex religious ceremonies, sacrificial rituals, and official proclamations. During this time, Imhotep and Nefertari couldn't see each other. The eyes of the entire kingdom were on the royal family, and any improper action would be noticed. Imhotep used this time to perfect the pyramid design. The project was already partially built, and now, with Khopha becoming pharaoh, the pace of construction accelerated. Nefertari, in her role as royal princess, had to participate in all the funeral ceremonies for her father and coronation ceremonies for her brother. She wore black mourning clothes, her face covered with tears, but not all were for her father. 1 month after ascending the throne, Pharaoh Khopha convened a special royal meeting. He announced that Princess Nefertari would marry Seneb, a wealthy and influential nobleman from Upper Egypt. This news surprised many. Seneb wasn't the top choice many had predicted, but no one dared question the pharaoh's decision. What most people didn't know was that Seneb was Khopha's closest friend, and he had agreed to this plan. Seneb was a middle-aged man, widowed, without children. He spent most of his time at his remote estate, rarely coming to the palace. Moreover, Seneb had a secret that only Khafre and a few others knew. He loved another man, a warrior in his personal guard. In ancient Egyptian society, though relatively more open than many other civilizations, such a relationship still had to be kept secret, especially for the noble class. Khafre had proposed a deal: Seneb would marry Nefertari in name, providing her with status and protection. In return, Khafre would ensure that Seneb's secret relationship was protected, and he would have the freedom to live his life without pressure to produce heirs. It was a perfect arrangement. Everyone got what they wanted. The wedding was held 3 months later, a grand event with thousands of attendees. Imhotep was also present, in his capacity as royal architect, a position Khafre had officially granted him a week earlier. He stood in the crowd, watching the woman he loved wearing a magnificent wedding dress, adorned with gold jewelry, walking beside another man. He knew this was just a performance, but that didn't lessen the pain in his heart. Nefertari, as she passed by, glanced at him briefly. In that glance, he saw everything: love, pain, hope, and a promise that this wasn't the end. After the wedding, Seneb and Nefertari officially moved to a small palace on the outskirts of Memphis. But as agreed, Seneb was almost never there. He spent most of his time at his estate, leaving Nefertari living alone in the palace with loyal servants. And Imhotep, as royal architect, had legitimate reasons to frequently visit construction projects nearby, including the palace where Nefertari was living. In the first year after the wedding, Imhotep and Nefertari found a strange form of happiness. Though they couldn't be public about their relationship, they could see each other more frequently and more freely than before. Nefertari's palace became their sanctuary. The servants had been carefully selected by Khafre. All were loyal and knew how to keep secrets. They understood that the royal architect frequently visited the princess to discuss construction projects. Imhotep even had his own room in the palace, called the Auxiliary Design Workshop. On paper, this was where he worked when he needed to be near the pyramid construction site. In reality, it was where he and Nefertari could be together. They ate dinner together, discussed art and philosophy, read poetry under the moonlight. Sometimes, they simply lay together in silence, enjoying each other's presence. "Is this happiness?" Nefertari asked one night, her head resting on Imhotep's shoulder. "Or just the shadow of happiness?" "If this is shadow," Imhotep replied, kissing her forehead gently, "then I don't need the light." 4 years after Khafre ascended the throne, his pyramid was completed. It wasn't as large as his father's pyramid, but it was more technically perfect. Each stone block was cut and placed with astonishing precision. The interior corridors were designed with a sophisticated ventilation system, and the burial chamber at the pyramid center was a masterpiece of engineering and aesthetics. On dedication day, the entire kingdom gathered to admire this magnificent structure. Pharaoh Khafre stood before the pyramid, praising the gods and rewarding those who participated in the construction. Imhotep was called forward to receive honors. Khafre presented him with a gold collar, a symbol of high status in Egyptian society, and declared him the greatest architect of our age. The crowd cheered. Imhotep bowed his head in thanks, but his eyes searched for only one person in the crowd: Nefertari. She stood there, wearing a magnificent princess gown, smiling with pride. In that moment, though they couldn't touch each other, they shared a deep connection. The pyramid wasn't just a monument to the pharaoh. It was also a monument to their love, a love carved into every stone. After the dedication, when everyone had left, Imhotep led Nefertari inside the pyramid through a secret entrance only he knew. They walked through dark corridors, torchlight creating dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, they reached the secret room, the room Imhotep had designed years before. It was a small space, about 3 meters square, completely hidden within the pyramid's wall structure. There was no obvious door. The entrance was a rotating stone panel, designed to look exactly like the surrounding stones. Imhotep had decorated this room in secret. There was a small bed with soft linen sheets. There were shelves with books and papyrus scrolls. There were oil lamps and incense. On the wall, he had carved images not of gods or pharaohs as usual, but images of 2 people, an architect and a princess. "This is ours," he said, his voice full of emotion. "In this great pyramid, there's a small space that only we know. Here, there's no pharaoh, no laws, no society, just us." Nefertari said nothing, just held him tightly and cried. These were tears of happiness. From then on, it became their sanctuary. Once a month, they met there, escaping the outside world, if only for a few hours. In that small space, deep within the pyramid, they could be themselves, not architect and princess, but just Imhotep and Nefertari, 2 people in love. 3 years passed in relative peace. Imhotep continued working on other projects, temples, palaces, and public works. His reputation spread throughout Egypt and beyond. Pharaohs from neighboring kingdoms invited him to consult on their construction projects, but he always refused. He didn't want to leave Nefertari, even for a short time. Nefertari, in her role as Seneb's wife, also had her own life. She became a famous philanthropist, using her husband's wealth to help the poor, build schools, and support artists. She was loved among the people and respected among the nobility. Seneb, true to his promise, lived his own life. He appeared beside Nefertari at public events when necessary, but spent most of his time at his estate with his lover. Occasionally, when meeting Imhotep, the 2 men nodded to each other with silent understanding. It was a strange arrangement, but it worked. Everyone was happy, or at least happy enough. 7 years after the wedding, Nefertari discovered she was pregnant. This news brought both tremendous joy and terrible anxiety. The child, of course, was Imhotep's, but in name it would be Seneb's. They had to be more careful than ever. Seneb was summoned from his estate to live at the palace throughout Nefertari's pregnancy, creating the appearance of a caring husband. Imhotep reduced his visits, appearing only when there was official business. But at night, when everyone was asleep, Imhotep would sneak into the palace through a secret passage. He sat beside Nefertari, placing his hand on her belly, feeling their child growing. "I'm scared," Nefertari confessed one night. "I'm afraid that when the child is born, it will look too much like you. Everyone will know." "Don't be afraid," Imhotep comforted, though he had the same anxiety. "We'll deal with whatever happens. I promise to protect you and our child." "Do you want it to be a boy or girl?" she asked, changing the subject. "I want it to be healthy and happy," he replied, "and I want it to know it's loved, no matter what circumstances." The child was born on a full moon night in spring. It was a healthy baby boy with bright eyes and a vigorous cry. Seneb, who was present during the birth to maintain appearances, immediately announced that the child would be named Amenemhat-Amun, is at the forefront, a strong and auspicious name. Imhotep wasn't allowed to be present at the birth, but he waited outside, along with other nobles and officials who were congratulating. When he heard the child's cry, his heart felt like it would burst. This was his son, his flesh and blood, but he couldn't publicly claim him. A few hours later, when everyone had left, he was allowed into the room as a family friend. Nefertari lay on the bed, exhausted but radiant, holding the baby. "Meet our son," she whispered as Imhotep approached. He looked down at that tiny face, and felt a wave of emotion wash over him. The child had his mother's eyes but his father's chin. When Imhotep extended his finger, the baby grasped it with tiny fingers. "Hello, son," Imhotep whispered, his voice full of emotion. I am someone who will always love you, even if you never know the truth." Seneb stood in the corner of the room, observing this scene with sympathy. "The child will be well cared for," he promised. "I will treat him like my own son." And he kept his promise. Amenemhat grew up in a strange but loving environment. Seneb, though not the biological father, cared for the boy like his own. He taught him about politics, about managing estates, about the art of diplomacy. Nefertari, of course, was a devoted mother. She spent every possible moment with her son, telling him stories, teaching him to read and write, passing on her love of art and culture. And Imhotep was Uncle Imhotep, the family friend, the famous architect who visited frequently. Young Amenemhat loved these visits. Imhotep taught him about mathematics and geometry, about the stars and planets, about building great structures. "Why do you know so many things, Uncle?" the 5-year-old boy asked one day. "Because Uncle loves learning," Imhotep replied, stroking the boy's hair, "and because Uncle wants to pass on knowledge to those Uncle cares about." The boy didn't understand the deeper meaning behind those words, but he sensed the genuine affection in Imhotep's voice. Sometimes, when just the three of them were together, Amenemhat would innocently call Imhotep his second father. Each time, Imhotep had to try not to show too much emotion. When Amenemhat turned 6, Imhotep decided to share a special secret with him. One day, with Nefertari's permission, he took the boy to the pyramid. "Today, Uncle will show you something no one else knows," Imhotep said seriously. "But you must promise to keep it secret." The boy, excited at the thought of knowing a secret, nodded enthusiastically. They went inside the pyramid, through the main corridors that thousands of visitors had walked through. But then, Imhotep stopped at a seemingly ordinary wall, pressed specific stones in a certain sequence. A large stone panel swung to the side, revealing a secret passage. "What is this?" Amenemhat asked, eyes wide with amazement. "This is a special place," Imhotep explained, leading him inside. "A place Uncle created for the most important things." They reached the secret room. Amenemhat looked around with boundless curiosity. He saw the carvings on the walls, the books, the personal items. "Why do you have this room, Uncle?" he asked. Imhotep knelt down to look straight into the boy's eyes. "Because sometimes, son, people need a place to keep their most precious things. Things the outside world doesn't understand or accept." The boy nodded, though not fully understanding. "One day," Imhotep continued, "when you're older, Uncle will tell you everything. But for now, just know that this room exists. And if you ever need a safe place, a place to think or escape the world, you can come here." He taught him how to open the secret door, how to close it again, how to make sure no one was following. When they left, Amenemhat held Imhotep's hand tighter than usual. "Uncle Imhotep?" "Yes, I love you." Those 3 simple words made Imhotep have to bite his lip to keep from crying. Are you moved by this story? If so, like the video and share it with friends who love history. And if you want to see more stories about ancient Egypt, check out the suggested video appearing on your screen right now. Not everyone was happy with Imhotep's success. Among those most envious of him was Jedefha, an old architect who had once been favored before Imhotep appeared. Jedefha was an ambitious and vindictive man. He had been demoted when his designs proved inferior to Imhotep's, and since then he had harbored thoughts of revenge. Jedefha began following Imhotep. At first, he hoped to find technical flaws in Imhotep's works to expose him. But Imhotep's works were too perfect. There was nothing to criticize. So Jedefah shifted to looking for personal weaknesses. He hired people to follow Imhotep, recording every action, every meeting. And then, after months of observation, Jedefah began to notice a strange pattern. Imhotep frequently visited Seneb and Nefertari's palace, too frequently for normal work. And these visits often lasted many hours, sometimes overnight. Initially, Jedefah thought perhaps Imhotep had business dealings with Seneb. But when investigating deeper, he discovered that Seneb was rarely present at the palace when Imhotep visited. Suspicion began forming in Jedefah's mind. Jedefah became obsessed with proving his suspicions. He knew that if he could prove Imhotep had an improper relationship with the royal princess, it would be the biggest scandal in Egyptian history. And he, as the one exposing the truth, would be rewarded and have his position restored. But gathering evidence wasn't easy. Imhotep and Nefertari were extremely careful. They never showed affection in public. Their private meetings were protected by loyal servants. Jedefah needed irrefutable evidence, a love letter, a credible witness, or best of all, catching them together. He began bribing some servants in Nefertari's palace. Most refused, but eventually he found one, a young servant named Kenti, who felt unfairly treated and wanted revenge. Kenti began reporting everything to Jedefah. He told of late-night meetings, of how the princess and architect looked at each other, of times Kenti caught them standing too close together. But these were still just accounts, not physical evidence. Jedefah devised a subtle plan. He would create a situation forcing Imhotep and Nefertari to reveal their relationship. He began spreading rumors that there was a plot to assassinate Pharaoh Khafre. This rumor, though false, caused panic in the palace. Security was increased. Everyone was under suspicion. During this chaotic period, Jedefah arranged for one of his men to act as an assassin and attack Nefertari when she was alone in the palace gardens. The plan was, when Nefertari was attacked, the first person she called for help would reveal who she trusted most. Jedefah bet it would be Imhotep. And he was right. One afternoon, as Nefertari was walking in the gardens, a masked man suddenly appeared and rushed toward her with a knife. Nefertari screamed. Servants ran over, but in that moment of panic, the first thing she did was shout, "Imhotep, save me!" That name, called with such desperation and intimacy, was enough to draw attention. Imhotep, who was in the nearby design workshop, heard the cry and ran immediately. He didn't think about consequences, only about protecting the woman he loved. He rushed into the garden, knocked down the attacker, and held Nefertari in a protective embrace. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice full of concern, forgetting they were in public. "I'm fine," she whispered, holding him tightly. Only when they heard whispers around them did they realize their mistake. Jedefah, who had hidden himself and observed everything, smiled victoriously. He had the evidence he needed, not physical proof, but public behavior enough to raise suspicion. In the following days, rumors spread like wildfire. People whispered about how the royal architect had reacted when the princess was in danger, about how she called his name as if he were her closest person, about how they embraced without any restraint. Jedefah skillfully added fuel to the fire, spreading more details, some true, some fabricated. Seneb, when he heard the news, immediately returned to the palace. He summoned Imhotep and Nefertari to a private meeting. "You both have been too careless," he said, his voice stern. "I warned you that you must always maintain appearances. But now the entire kingdom is talking about you." "We're sorry," Nefertari said, her voice trembling. "But at that moment I couldn't think. I know," Seneb interrupted, his voice softer. "And I don't blame you. But now we must deal with the consequences." Pharaoh Khafre also heard about the rumors. He summoned all parties involved: Imhotep, Nefertari, Senib, and Jedefah to a private hearing. "I have heard serious allegations," Khofre said, his voice cold. Though he knew the truth, he had to maintain the appearance of a fair pharaoh. "Jedefah, what do you accuse?" Jedefah stepped forward, his voice full of false confidence. "Your Majesty, I don't wish to cause trouble, but duty to the kingdom compels me to speak. I have evidence that architect Imhotep and Princess Nefertari have an improper relationship." "Evidence?" Khofre asked, his voice dangerous. "I have witnesses who have seen them meet many times in private places. I have servants who will testify about late-night meetings. And Your Majesty saw how they behaved in the garden when the incident occurred." Khofre turned to Imhotep and Nefertari. "How do you answer?" This was the critical moment. If they denied it, but Jedefah had more convincing evidence, they would be seen as liars. If they admitted it, the consequences would be terrible. But before they could say anything, Senib spoke up. "Your Majesty, I can explain." Senib stood up, his face serious but calm. "Your Majesty," he began, "I am fully aware of the relationship between my wife and architect Imhotep, and I approve of it." The entire hearing room fell silent. Even Jedefah was shocked by this declaration. "You approve?" Khofre asked, feigning surprise. "Yes, Your Majesty," Senib continued, "because I know a secret that few know: I cannot have children." This was a lie prepared in advance. Senib and Khofre had discussed this situation years before and prepared a contingency script. "An illness from my youth left me sterile," Senib explained, his voice sad but dignified. "When I married Princess Nefertari, I knew the dynasty needed an heir from Your Majesty's lineage. So, after consulting with Your Majesty," he turned to Khofre, who nodded slightly. "The princess and I agreed that to ensure the bloodline, a special arrangement was necessary. Imhotep was chosen not only for his talent, but also for his noble character and loyalty to the royal family." Jedefah cried out, "This is absurd! Your Majesty cannot silence!" Khofre roared, his voice full of authority. "You dare interrupt a member of the royal family?" The pharaoh turned to Senib. "You speak truthfully. I was aware of and approved this arrangement. That's why I chose you as husband for my sister, because I knew you would put the kingdom's interests above personal feelings." This was a bold lie, but it made complete sense in the context of Egyptian culture, where the royal bloodline was considered sacred and had to be maintained by any means. But Jedefah stammered, unable to believe what he was hearing. "Of course, this had to be kept secret," Khofre continued. "The people don't need to know the complex arrangements of the royal family. But now, because of your rumors, I'm forced to clarify the truth." He turned to the other members in the room. "Anyone who reveals what was said today will be executed for treason. This is the pharaoh's command." Jedefah left the hearing room in complete humiliation. Not only had he failed to bring down Imhotep, but now he was seen as someone who had tried to create division within the royal family. A week later, Jedefah was exiled to a remote oasis, with the reason having disturbed the court. He would spend the rest of his life there, far from all power and influence. But although the crisis had been resolved, it left scars. Imhotep and Nefertari realized they had been very lucky. Without the intervention of Senib and Khofre, they could have lost everything. "We must be more careful," Nefertari said at their next meeting in the secret room inside the pyramid. "We nearly lost everything." "I know," Imhotep agreed, holding her close. "But I also realized something. No matter what danger we face, I cannot live without you." In the years that followed, Amenemhat grew into a smart and talented young man. He inherited intellectual sharpness from both parents and benefited from being taught by three excellent people. Senib taught him about politics and management, Nefertari taught him about art and culture, and Imhotep taught him about science and architecture. When he turned 12, Amenemhat began having questions. He noticed that he didn't look like Sineb. He also noticed the special relationship between his mother and Uncle Imhotep. One day he confronted his mother. "Mother," he said, his voice more serious than a 12-year-old's, "I need to know the truth. Is Seneb my biological father?" Nefertari knew this day would come. She had prepared for it for years. But when the actual moment arrived, she still felt her heart ache. She looked into her son's eyes exactly like hers, but with something in the gaze that resembled Imhotep. "No," she answered honestly. "Sineb is your wonderful adoptive father, but not your biological father." "Then who is my biological father?" She took a deep breath. "Imhotep." Amenemhat was silent, processing this information. After a long while, he said, "I guessed as much." "You guessed?" Nefertari was surprised. "Yes," he nodded. "Uncle Imhotep looks at me in a different way, and Mother looks at him in a different way. I'm not a stupid child, Mother." Nefertari didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Are you angry at me?" Amenemhat thought for a moment. "No," he finally answered. I think I'm lucky. I have 3 parents who love me, while most people only have 2. And I have a family, even if it's not in the traditional way." Nefertari hugged her son, tears of happiness and relief flowing down. Later, she arranged a meeting between Amenemhat and Imhotep. For the first time, they could talk to each other as father and son, not as uncle and nephew. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" Amenemhat asked. "Because we wanted to protect you," Imhotep explained. "This truth, if known, could endanger you. But now you're old enough to understand and keep the secret." "Do you love my mother?" He asked a simple but profound question. "With all my heart," Imhotep replied without hesitation. "I've loved your mother from the first moment I met her. And when you were born, you became the second most precious thing in my life." Amenemhat stood up and went to hug Imhotep for the first time as a son hugging his father. And Imhotep, the strong man who had built great structures, cried. When Imhotep reached 50, he began thinking about his legacy. He had built many pyramids, temples, palaces. His name would be remembered in Egyptian history forever. But there was one final project. He wanted to complete a project just for him and Nefertari. He began designing a double tomb, hidden in a remote valley far from the city. Unlike the splendid royal tombs, this one was small and simple, but designed with all the skill and love he possessed. In the tomb, he carved their story on the walls not in writing, but in symbols and images only they could understand. It was a stone book about their love, encoded, so that only those who truly understood them could decipher it. "Why are you building this, father?" Amenemhat asked when invited to see the project. He was now 15 and served as Imhotep's architectural assistant. "Because when your mother and I pass away," Imhotep explained, "I want us to rest together. In life, we couldn't publicly be husband and wife. But in death, no one can prevent us." "But mother is supposed to be buried in the royal tomb," Amenemhat pointed out. "That's true," Imhotep nodded. "That's why this tomb must be kept secret. When the time comes, there will be a plan." Pharaoh Khafre died after 26 years of reign. He was a just and wise pharaoh, loved by the people and remembered by history. But for Imhotep and Nefertari, his death had special significance. Khafre was the one who had protected their secret, who had made it possible for them to love each other. Without him, who knew what their fate would have been? At the funeral, Nefertari stood beside her brother's coffin, tears streaming down. Partly because she genuinely mourned him, partly because she feared the future without his protection. The new pharaoh was Menkaure, Khafre's son. He was a kind 23-year-old young man, but inexperienced. Did he know about Imhotep and Nefertari's secret? Would he continue to protect them as his father had? These questions worried them for months afterward. Menkora summoned Imhotep and Nefertari to meet privately a few weeks after ascending the throne. "Uncle Imhotep, Aunt Nefertari," he began, using intimate forms of address, "my father told me about your special arrangement." They waited, not knowing what would come. "I understand that your situation is complex," Menkora continued, "and I also understand that my father trusted and protected you. I intend to continue doing so." They breathed a sigh of relief. "But," the young pharaoh added, "I'll be frank with you. The court has many people who don't know about this arrangement and wouldn't understand if they knew. I'll do my best to protect you, but you must also help me by continuing to be extremely careful." "We understand, Your Majesty," Imhotep said, "and we are immensely grateful." "One more thing," Menkora said, his voice softer. "Amenemhat, does he know?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Nefertari replied. "My son knows the truth and has accepted it." "Good," the pharaoh nodded. "He's a good boy. My father was very fond of him, and so am I. I'll ensure he has a bright future in this kingdom, regardless of the circumstances of his birth." Time passed relentlessly, like the waters of the Nile. Imhotep entered his 60s, then 70s. His hair turned white, his body no longer strong as before. But his mind remained sharp. He continued designing, continued teaching, continued inspiring the new generation of architects. Nefertari also aged, but in Imhotep's eyes, she was still as beautiful as the day they first met. The wrinkles on her face only told the story of the years they had spent together, the joys, the sorrows, the trials and triumphs. Sinib had died a few years earlier, a peaceful death at 80. On his deathbed, he had told Imhotep and Nefertari, "I've had a good life. I was loved, I had family, even if not in the traditional way. I regret nothing." After his death, Imhotep and Nefertari had more freedom. They still had to be careful, but no longer had to maintain the appearance of a fake marriage. Amenemhat, now 35, had become an excellent architect in his own right. He had built many important structures and was trusted by Pharaoh Menkora. He had also married a kind noblewoman named Merit, and they had 3 children. Imhotep, as grandfather, loved spending time with these grandchildren, teaching them the things he had taught Amenemhat. One day, Amenemhat came to see Imhotep with a proposal. "Father," he said now, when alone, they no longer had to hide their father-son relationship, "I want to build a memorial for you, to preserve your name and achievements for posterity." "No need," Imhotep shook his head with a smile. "The pyramids, temples, and palaces are my memorial. They will stand for thousands of years after I'm gone. But I want people to know that you built them," Amenemhat insisted. "Those who need to know will know," Imhotep replied wisely. "And for those who don't know, what does a name matter? The work speaks for itself." But then, he added gently, however, "There is one memorial I want, it's you, Amenemhat. You are my greatest masterpiece, more than any pyramid." When Nefertari reached 72, her health began declining rapidly. The physicians diagnosed her with a heart condition, an illness they had no way to cure. "How much time does she have?" Imhotep asked the physicians, his voice trembling. "Perhaps a few months," they replied sympathetically. "Or maybe just a few weeks. We can't be certain." Imhotep spent every possible moment beside Nefertari. He moved to live in her palace, no longer caring what people thought. At 75, he was too old to care about public opinion. They lay together each night, holding hands, remembering the years that had passed. "Do you have any regrets?" Nefertari asked one night, her voice weak. "Regrets about what?" Imhotep asked back. "Everything," she said. The secrecy, the uncertainty, never being able to live openly as husband and wife. Imhotep thought for a moment before answering. I would be lying if I said I didn't wish things could have been different. But regrets? No, I have no regrets. Because in any circumstance I had you. And that was all I needed. I love you, she whispered. I love you, he replied. I will love you until my last breath and beyond death. Nefertari died early one morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window. Imhotep was lying beside her, holding her hand. She opened her eyes, looked at his face, smiled weakly. Meet me there, she whispered. Where? He asked, though he already knew the answer. At the tomb, she said, where we'll be together forever. I promise, he said, tears streaming down his face. She closed her eyes, still smiling, and breathed her last breath. Imhotep sat there, holding her hand for many hours afterward, not wanting to let go. Finally, Amenemhat had to come and gently pull him away. You must let mother go, father, he said softly. I know, Imhotep whispered. But how can I? She was everything to me. Nefertari's public funeral was held with all the ceremony due a royal princess. Thousands came to pay their respects. She was praised for her charity, intelligence, and beauty. Her body was placed in a magnificent coffin and buried in the royal tomb beside her father and brother. But that wasn't the whole story. Before she died, Nefertari had discussed a plan with Imhotep and Amenemhat. She wanted her true self, her heart, memories, soul to rest with Imhotep in the secret tomb he had built. Amenemhat arranged everything. During the mummification process, a small portion of Nefertari's remains from her heart, the organ considered to contain the soul in Egyptian belief, was secretly removed. This portion was placed in a small gold box, engraved with symbols of love. Imhotep hid it in the secret room inside the pyramid until the time came. The story is coming to its conclusion. If you've followed this far, you're truly someone who loves deep stories. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss similar videos. And let me know in the comments, do you think love can transcend death? After Nefertari's death, Imhotep seemed to lose his will to live. He no longer cared about work, no longer had interest in anything. He only lived because of the promise he had made to Nefertari that they would rest together. He spent most of his time in the secret room inside the pyramid, where they had had their happiest moments. He sat there for hours, holding the gold box containing a part of Nefertari, remembering the past. Amenemhat worried about his father. Father must eat, he pleaded. Father must maintain your health. Why? Imhotep asked simply. I have no one left to live for. You still have me, Amenemhat reminded him. You still have your grandchildren. I know, Imhotep said, his voice gentler, and I love you all. But no one can replace her. Despite weak health, Imhotep was determined to complete the secret tomb before he died. He worked every day, with help from Amenemhat and some trusted craftsmen. The tomb was built in a remote mountain canyon, hidden by sand and rocks. The entrance was perfectly camouflaged. Only those who knew exactly where to look could discover it. Inside, there were 2 sarcophagi stone coffins placed side by side. On the walls, Imhotep carved their story in images and symbols. 2 people meeting in gardens, they working together on pyramid blueprints. They holding hands under moonlight, a child being born, they growing old together, all drawn with exquisite skill and love. Anyone who looked would see this was the story of a great love. In a secret compartment, he placed the gold box containing Nefertari's heart. Beside it, he placed a letter, his final letter to her. My beloved Nefertari, when you read these lines, if souls can read in the afterlife, I will already be beside you. I have lived 75 years in this world. 50 of those years were spent loving you. Those were the happiest 50 years a man could have. I regret nothing. Every moment with you, whether happy or sad, was worthwhile. Every danger I faced, every lie I had to tell, every night I had to hide, all worth it, just to lie beside you one more time. I have built many structures in my life, pyramids, temples, palaces, but my greatest masterpiece wasn't those things. It was the life I built with you, even in darkness and secrecy. I have left instructions for Amenemhat. He will ensure that when I die, a part of me will be brought here to lie beside you. The outside world may never know we lie together, but the gods will know. And that's all that matters. Wait for me on the other side, my love. We will have all eternity to be together, no more secrets, no more fear. Forever yours, even beyond death, Imhotep. A week after completing the tomb, Imhotep knew his time had come. He felt life slowly leaving his body, like sand flowing through fingers. He summoned Amenemhat. "My son," he said, his voice weak but clear, "it's time. I'm going to join your mother." "Father." "Don't say that," Amenemhat said, though knowing it was true. "Don't be sad," Imhotep said, smiling. "This isn't the end. This is just the beginning of the next chapter." He gave Amenemhat a carefully sealed papyrus scroll. "These are the instructions. Follow exactly what's written. Don't let anyone else know." Amenemhat nodded, tears streaming down. "You have made me proud," Imhotep said, placing his hand on his son's cheek. "You are living proof of my and your mother's love. Remember that, and tell your children about us not as great kings or architects, but as two people who loved each other despite everything." Imhotep died 3 days later, in his sleep, with a smile on his lips. His public funeral was a grand event. Pharaoh Menkaure declared 3 days of national mourning. Tens of thousands poured into the streets to pay respect to the greatest architect of the age. His body was placed in a splendid tomb near the pyramid he had designed. The gods were called to protect his soul on the journey to the afterlife. But once again, that wasn't the whole story. Amenemhat followed the instructions in the papyrus scroll exactly. During the mummification process, he secretly removed his father's heart just as he had done with his mother. One moonless night, when everyone was asleep, Amenemhat and some trusted workers brought this portion to the secret tomb in the mountain canyon. They opened the right sarcophagus, the one prepared for Imhotep. Inside, they placed the small gold box containing his heart beside the final letter he had written. Then they closed the sarcophagus and sealed it with curses and spells to protect it forever. When the work was complete, Amenemhat stood between the 2 sarcophagi, one containing a part of his mother, one containing a part of his father. Though not their entire bodies, in Egyptian belief, the heart contained the soul, and now those 2 souls rested together. "Goodbye, mother." "Goodbye, father," Amenemhat whispered. "You can finally be together with no barriers." Many years passed. Amenemhat grew old and died, but before that he passed the secret to his eldest son, and that son passed it to his, and so it continued. Through generations, the story of Imhotep and Nefertari was told as a family legend, a story of great ancestors, of love transcending all barriers, of sacrifice and loyalty. The secret tomb was kept as a sacred legacy. Each generation had one person chosen to know its location and protect the secret. The pyramids Imhotep designed still stand, witnesses to his talent and vision. People came from all over the world to admire them, amazed at the precision and beauty of the structures. But few knew that deep inside one of those pyramids, there was a secret room where 2 people in love had once met, where they had found moments of happiness in a world full of rules and restrictions. Time passed. Dynasties changed. Ancient Egypt declined and was conquered. New civilizations rose and fell, but the pyramids still stood there immutable in the desert. In the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists from around the world came to Egypt to discover the secrets of the past. They found tombs, deciphered hieroglyphics, restored stories of pharaohs and nobility. But the secret tomb of Imhotep and Nefertari remained undiscovered. It still lay hidden in the remote canyon, covered by sand and time. Perhaps one day it will be discovered. And then the world will know about this great love story not from official texts or royal documents, but from the very carvings on the tomb walls, from two gold boxes lying side by side, from a love letter perfectly preserved through millennia. And people will understand that true love knows no boundaries, not social status, not power, not even death. The story of Imhotep and Nefertari isn't just a love story. It's a story about courage, the courage to love when society forbids it, the courage to live from the heart in a world demanding obedience to reason. It's a story about sacrifice, what they gave up to be together, the public moments they could never have, the loving words that had to be kept secret. But above all, it's a story about immortal love. Love doesn't need society's recognition to exist. Love doesn't need status or power to be strong. Love only needs two hearts willing to beat in rhythm, two souls willing to seek each other through all obstacles. When you look up at the great pyramids of Egypt, remember that they aren't just cold stone structures. Every stone, every perfect angle, every secret corridor carries within it stories of people who loved, hoped, dreamed. And perhaps, somewhere in those ancient structures, there are still undiscovered secrets. Stories waiting to be told. Loves waiting to be honored. Imhotep and Nefertari found a way to be together, even if only in darkness and secrecy. They created a world of their own, a world between the stones of the pyramid, in hidden rooms, in nighttime whispers. And finally, when death came, the final enemy of all earthly love, they found a way to defeat it. By planning a secret tomb, by ensuring their souls would rest together, they made their love eternal. So when you think about ancient Egypt, don't just think about powerful pharaohs or mysterious gods. Think about ordinary people who did extraordinary things for love. Think about an architect who built a secret room in the heart of a pyramid just to meet the woman he loved. Think about a princess who gave up the comfort and safety of royal life to sneak away at night, just to lie in the arms of the man she loved. Think about a child born of forbidden love, but who grew up in a loving environment and became a good man. Think about a secret tomb lying somewhere in the Egyptian desert, where two souls are resting together, finally free from all earthly barriers. That is the story of Imhotep and Nefertari, the architect, and the princess, the commoner and the royal, two people who shouldn't have loved but did, who couldn't be together but found a way. It's a story about love transcending time, transcending space, transcending even death, and it reminds us that, no matter what era we live in, no matter our circumstances, true love always finds a way. It may face obstacles, may have to wait, may have to sacrifice, but it never truly ends. Because love, like the pyramids, is built to last forever. And that is the story of Imhotep and Nefertari, the architect of the pharaoh and the forbidden love beneath the pyramid. If you were moved by this story, I have something to ask you. First, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss similar stories in the future. I'll continue bringing emotionally charged and meaningful historical stories like this. Second, like this video and share it with friends who love history, who believe in the power of love. Third, leave a comment and let me know, what do you think about this story? If you were Imhotep or Nefertari, would you have the courage to pursue love despite all dangers? I really want to read your thoughts. Fourth, if you want to explore more about ancient Egypt, check out my Mysteries of Egypt playlist. There are many fascinating stories waiting for you to discover. Link is in the video description. And finally, if you want to support the channel so I can continue creating quality videos like this, consider becoming a channel member or supporting through Patreon. Every bit of support, no matter how small, helps me tremendously. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video to the very end. Having you here means so much to me. Remember, true love knows no boundaries. It can be hidden, tested, even forbidden, but it never truly dies. Like the pyramids standing firm through thousands of years, true love exists forever in the hearts of those who dare to love. And this is. See you in the next video with another fascinating historical story. Until then, love with all your heart, live with all your might, and never let anyone tell you your love isn't strong enough to overcome all obstacles. Goodbye and take care of those you love. Note to viewers, the story you just heard is a work of fiction inspired by ancient Egyptian history. However, there are some actual historical elements I want to share with you. The truth about the historical Imhotep. There was a real Imhotep in Egyptian history. He lived around 2650–2600 BCE, earlier than the period in our story. He was the chancellor, architect, and physician of Pharaoh Djoser, and is credited with designing the first step pyramid at Saqqara. The real Imhotep was deified after his death, an extremely rare occurrence in Egyptian history. He was worshipped as a god of medicine and wisdom. About the pyramids, the Giza pyramids, including the pyramids of Khufu, Cheops, Kofa Chefron, and Menkaure, are truly miraculous architectural achievements. Khufu's Great Pyramid is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. Archaeologists are still discovering secrets of these pyramids. New chambers and corridors continue to be found using modern technology like radar scanning and Moan tomography. About royal marriage in ancient Egypt, royal marriage was indeed very complex. Pharaohs often married their siblings to keep the royal bloodline pure. Royal princesses sometimes married nobles or high officials for political reasons. However, there's no historical evidence of a specific relationship like the one in our story. This is a work of fiction exploring themes of love and society. About tombs and beliefs, ancient Egyptians truly believed the heart was the center of intelligence and the soul. During mummification, most internal organs were removed, but the heart was usually kept inside the body. Secret tombs really did exist. Many pharaohs and nobles attempted to hide their burial places to avoid tomb robbers. The Valley of the Kings is a prime example. Why this story matters, though this story is fiction, it reflects universal themes, love transcending social boundaries throughout the ages. People have always faced social barriers in love, whether class, race, religion, or gender. The tension between duty and desire. Both Imhotep and Nefertari had to balance social responsibility with personal desire, a struggle many still experience today. Legacy isn't just material. Imhotep left pyramids, but his true legacy was his son and their love story. This reminds us that what we leave behind, most importantly, is the relationships and impact we have on others. Love and death. The story explores how love faces the ultimate enemy, death, and finds ways to survive beyond it. Final message: no matter how much of this story is fictional, the emotions within it are real. The longing to be loved and accepted, the fear of losing those we love, the joy of secret moments, the pain of separation, all are universal human experiences. Egypt's pyramids have stood for over 4,500 years, and they may stand for another 4,500 more. They are testament to the extraordinary capability of humanity, the ability to create things that transcend time. But even more magnificent than those stones is love, which can also transcend time if we dare to nurture and protect it. So, whoever you are, wherever you are, in whatever circumstances, remember your love has value. It's worth fighting for. It's worth sacrificing for. And it will last longer than any pyramid. Thank you once again for following this story. Love powerfully, live fully, and never give up on what matters most. See you in the next video.